Oh, hello! My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Alrighty guys, we're at the end of the month, and that means it is time to wrap up my reading. I am going to film this in two parts just because of the timing of when the end of the month is falling and some travel I'm doing and some people who are coming in from out of town. I'm going to do most of the filming in this session, but I'm not quite at the end of the month, so I will leave the door open for me to insert a different favorite or a different disappointment or whatever. And I also will do my stats wrap up in the future once we really are at the end of the month. So I'm gonna pause here and throw you to future me, who is gonna tell you about my overall reading stats. Okay guys, hello from the future. It is now the 30th of June, and to get this up when I want it to go up, I need to just call it a day, even though I have 4 books in progress and there's a very good chance I will finish a couple of them today. We're just gonna say that we're done. So for the month of June, as things stand right now, let's pull up my little spreadsheet. So I read 20 books, is that right? Yes. So I finished 20 books already. I read a total of 8,600 pages with an average page count of 290 pages per book. My average age of books was about 17 years, and the average length of time that book had been on my TBR was 5 months. So those are all good stats, what I like to see. In terms of percentage-wise, about 75% of what I read was on my TBR, and 25% were books that were not on my TBR. They weren't owned. And by the way, when I say that, what I mean is my physical or e-TBR versus the library or subscription or something like that. So 75-25 there. When we start looking at genre, okay, so it looks like my biggest genre this month was mystery. That feels right to me. Followed by kind of general nonfiction type books, a few sci-fi, a couple of romance, and then just little one-offs in other genre categories, but pretty good blend with a heavier emphasis on mystery and nonfiction, it looks like this month. In terms of where I got my books from, Amazon is the highest one. That's usually the case just by virtue of the fact that I read ebooks, and if I own them, they probably came from Amazon. A couple of new bookshops, some from the library, some from publishers. Nice little mix there. And then finally, when we get to my ratings, so my average rating was 3.275, which is lower than it's been for a lot of this year, but I'm fine with that because I feel like I'm taking more risks. I'm reading a bigger variety of things that I do and don't like, which I actually kind of think is good. So do have some DNFs, some 1 stars, some 1.5 stars too, some things down there in the lower end, a few 3 and 3.5 stars, but I read 6 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and if you guys recall, that is a favorite of the year, and then 1 5-star, which is a favorite of all time. So, I mean, taking some risks, some swings, some misses, but the hits, they were hitting. So, and I should also just mention that I thank you guys so much because I hit 6,000 subscribers on YouTube this month. That is bananas. People are coming in so fast, I don't know where they're coming from, but I am so excited to all the new people who are here. Welcome. And I'm also very close to hitting 1,000 followers on Instagram. And when that happens, I am going to do a giveaway as a thank you to you guys, because I just realized that managing giveaways through YouTube is something I really don't enjoy. It's much easier to do it through Instagram. So I'm just, from now on, any giveawayness, I will mention it here so that you guys can go participate if you want to. But on my Instagram, look for probably pretty soon, because I think I'm 30-ish people away from hitting 1,000 followers. And yeah, when that happens, I think I've got 3 or 4 books that are going to be in that giveaway. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I will throw you back to the past. Okay, wow, right? Future me is glowing. She's living. She's just radiant. Ugh. Love her. Okay, so we're back in the past. And so let's start by talking about all of the challenges I addressed this month, because as you guys know, I had my mid-year check-in last week. And if you couldn't tell from that, I have a shit ton of challenges going. So I try to check in, keep myself accountable every month. So a challenge I can't tell you guys about yet, but I did read this for it, is In West Mills by Deshaun Charles Winslow. This was good. Like I would tell you, totally give this a try. This is a debut. I think it's really well written, and I really liked the main character in this. I will just say, for me, it didn't personally connect. Historical fiction is one where it's very hit or miss for me if I end up liking it. Like sometimes I love it. Other times it can be really good, but I just don't connect with it for whatever reason. I'd put this book in that category basically. So I gave it a 3-star. I could totally see how for someone else who really connected with it, it could be a 5-star book. It's good. Like I mean, I would tell you that this is really well done. It just personally wasn't my favorite. Anyway, that is for a challenge that you guys, I think, will be seeing a wrap up for in July. So stay tuned for that. I also read A Handful of Dust by Evelyn Waugh, which was on my classics TBR, an Evelyn Waugh book. I wanted to read one of those this year. So this was the one. I give this 3.5 stars. I'll talk about it more when we get into my other categories. And then last but not least, I also read Sleeping Murder. This was a first read for me, and it is my last full novel that I needed to read for Mission Marple. So I did that one. We'll talk more about it later. Okay, so then moving into my disappointments, I have 4 books I want to talk about, some of which I can talk fully about and some of which I cannot. Let's start with the one I cannot talk fully about, and that is The 10th Girl by Sarah Faring. So I did this as a buddy read with Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I will link her below. And I think what I will say about this book is that it is going to be very polarizing. I am so annoyed that I cannot give good descriptions about this book to steer the people who would really love it to it. I can only tell you that I had some really big problems with this book, and so I gave it a 2-star. Things that I liked about it that I can tell you about include that I really liked some of the representation of an indigenous Argentinian tribe and their mythology that gets referenced in this. I really liked that this was a book that was creative. And I'm not going to say it's completely unique because there's a couple of books I really want to compare it to that I can't because it would be a spoiler. So it's not wholly unique, but I think that it is unusual, and I was never bored in this. So even though I ultimately find this to be disappointing, and I would say I didn't like this, this is not like basic bitch YA. This is sold as like YA mystery horror kind of thing. It's not like the basic version of that. This kept me very engaged the entire time. So like, I think it's a book that you will have a response to, and I'm very annoyed that I can't guide the people to this who I think genuinely would really like this. Basically, this comes down to, and this is like well known in the reviewing discussion around this, there is a twist in this book that you're either really gonna like or you're really gonna not. And for me, I respect the fact that it was an idea, but for me, wasn't sold on it. So that's all I could really say about this book, which is very frustrating. Me and Bethany had a very good buddy read discussion about this because she actually really loved this. I think she gave this 5 stars. So great example. I'm sure she'll have a discussion about this up at some point. You can contrast kind of what each of us says about this and maybe get a better idea of if you're going to be somebody who likes it. But we had a really good discussion. I think we both understood where the other person was coming from. And what we mutually agreed was that it's very frustrating to try to talk about this in a meaningful way with people. So I'll leave that there. 2 stars for me. I think my most disappointing only insofar as there's a lot of promise here. The other thing I would tell you is that this is a debut author, and I would definitely be interested in reading more from this author in the future. This book just didn't do it for me. I'll leave that there. Other disappointments. So one, just quickly I'll mention, is Why Young Men by, I believe, Jamil Jivani is the author's name. This is basically a book. It's called Why Young Men, and essentially it's ostensibly trying to address the question of like, why is it that young men in this time are so susceptible to being radicalized by various different sort of like nationalist or religious movements? And I think this book, I gave this 3 stars. It's not terrible. I will contrast it to another book later that I think did some of what it is trying to do a lot better. But this isn't a terrible book. This just is a book that I think doesn't quite know what it wants to be when it grows up. It's not memoir enough to be a satisfying memoir, and it's not got enough like either kind of like ideological or philosophical musings or like sociological reportage. Like it just has little sprinklings of all of those things, and it's not mixed together well. Like it's a nonfiction genre blend that doesn't quite come together, I think, which is why I gave it 3 stars. I also do think that it suffers a little bit from the kind of like pull your pants up type discussion around why some young men are struggling, and there were hints of that I don't feel like were always fully addressed. So 3 stars for me. It was disappointing because I was very interested in that topic. Again, when we get to my hits, we'll talk about a book that both handled the genre mixing and nonfiction a lot better, and also I think explored some of these questions around like toxic masculinity basically in a lot more interesting way. And then the 2 books that I gave the lowest ratings to, so I gave 1.5 stars to A Dark and Stormy Night by Jeanne M. Dams. This is a book that is making me question whether or not I actually like cozy mysteries, because I keep trying to read cozy mysteries that were written, like, let's say after 1970, and I keep really bumming out with them. This is an isolated closed circle mystery, pretty much, which you guys know that I love and have been like very focusedly reading in that subgenre recently. And I love that trope so much, and this book cannot make me even just like it okay. I think to a different reader, this could easily be a 3-star book or like a 4 maybe even. But for me, I gave this 1.5 stars because I was so annoyed with it the entire time. Like, I really did not like this book. I think the thing that like tipped me over into having active contempt for it is the fact that this is set in a British country manor, and yet basically everyone is American and all they do is talk about how they're American. You know, I'm proud to be an American. I don't have like a problem with Americanness, but like, girl, honestly, if somebody brought up the fact that they were American one more time and just like highlighted the fact that like we are in the UK, we are in a rural country manor in the UK, and yet why are everybody, anyway, it really was a writing tick that once I noticed it, I could not unsee it, and it was driving me batty. So anyway, just not a book for me, not a book I enjoyed, and I'm really gonna have to start like answering some tough questions for myself if I like cozy mysteries at all, because I seem to not be able to find ones that I really wholeheartedly enjoy. There's a tweeness to them that I'm not enjoying, and I don't understand why, because I really like small town settings and like kind of in theory cute settings for like romance and also for kind of like suspensey type books. I don't know. I'm having somewhat of like an existential genre crisis here. And then the last disappointment I want to mention is a book that made me so angry. And it's not like, this is a book that I have pretty low standards for. This is very pulpy genre fiction. All I'm looking for is like a cheap tropey thrill and to move on with my life. I'm not asking a lot. But I made a mistake because, okay, so here's the backstory here. So late last year, I found an author named Alexa Riley, who I've actually really enjoyed because they write extremely over the top protective alpha heroes in these like novella length little contemporary romance books. They are so over the top, but they have a level of self-awareness to how like crazy the heroes are, basically. Like, they are crazy possessive, like insta love like you would not believe. But there is this authorial awareness of the fact that this is an extreme version of the trope. And like, if you read the author's note, it's often like, this one is so crazy that if it was real life, you would call the police. Like, I mean, there's always like this wink to the audience. And what that does is it lets me enjoy what is a trope I otherwise have very little patience for. We will get to that here in a minute. Because the author is in on like, we're mainlining the crazy to you in this trope. Like, enjoy just the pure trope candy. And I can get on board with that. So I like Alexa Riley, and I've been trying to like branch out, and like Alexa Riley does a lot of like series with other authors. So I've been trying to like explore some of the backlist of other authors that they often collaborate with, because I figured, hey, like if they're collaborating, maybe this means, you know, like that there could be things for me here. And one author who had a lot of things that I think were sufficiently self-aware for me to enjoy them and sufficiently like kind of crazy and over the top with a wink to the audience was Fiona Davenport. So I've read a few of those. I came to Fraternization Rule, and you guys, there was no self-awareness. There was no winking. All there was this utterly abusive, like horrible man who is like a professor taking advantage of his student. And I kept expecting, because like, again, it's in the same group of people who seem to have some awareness about this trope and like undercut it. Like, part of what they're doing is they're going, here's what it reminds me of. Here's what I like in this space. The same way that Quentin Tarantino has such extreme violence in his movies that it is essentially like a cartoon, and like the over-the-topness of it is a comment on it. This is the equivalent of these alpha heroes, okay? Except that this is no longer the self-awareness. This is no longer like cartoonish. This is just like, oh, you actually think that like we're supposed to be cheering for this behavior right now. When I tell you that like I kept waiting, because most of the time this is the protective alpha trope. So like usually what that means is it's like super over the top, very like intense, but like all the energy is directed towards like, I will protect you. Like I will get you everything you want. Like it's that. No, this is just an asshole who is like, I know that you have dreams and that you have been accepted to a PhD program at Berkeley, but I don't care. I'm gonna like get you pregnant and trap you into a marriage because like I cannot compromise at all. Like not even one iota. And like when the resolution of this story comes, it has nothing to do. I kept waiting, guys, for this alpha to have like, I thought that was what the like conflict was gonna turn, of him realizing like, I'm making this woman so unhappy because I'm forcing her to like choose between things and I'm not giving any inch. So like, I'm going to find a way for us to both get what we want out of this. No, that is not what happens. Yes, they both end up getting what they want out of this, but it is not through the hero doing jack shit. It's through some random third party, like coming in and being like, oh, here's a solution. He's like, oh, that's great. I'm so glad that you presented a solution. Wouldn't have mattered if you didn't. I still was getting what I wanted, so that was what was really important. But like, cool. I'm glad that my soon-to-be wife will stop pouting about the fact that I've made her get rid of all of her hopes and dreams. Cool. Better for me. Now we can bone. What? I hated it so much. Like it sent me back into the like, I let my guard down and was like starting to enjoy some of this like pure trope candy. But no, you've invaded my safe space, and this is not my pure trope candy. This is like no self-awareness. This is abusive. This is awful. And especially in light of my favorite book I read this month, really upset me. So all that to say, I did not enjoy Fraternization Rule. And I'm just going to stick with Alexa Riley and a couple of the others I found and just like stay in my safe zone where I know that the author is aware of how problematic this behavior is. So hard pivot out of that rant into my surprises. So first, A Handful of Dust. This, along with The Good Soldier, has taught me something. And that is, I've always known that I did not like an infidelity or cheating or whatever plot in a romance, because like I don't see how two people who start their relationship by like fundamentally betraying the type of arrangement they're trying to have with someone else, I don't see how that's resulting in happiness. I'm sure it does in some cases, like don't at me, but like just in theory, that's a hard sell for me to get on board with. So I don't like that. But A Handful of Dust, along with The Good Soldier, like these are literary novels, and like the main conflict or a main conflict in both of them is marital infidelity. And I think I was talking about this in my classics TBR check-in, but it just makes me so anxious, and I don't know why. Like, I am not married. I've never been married. I've never been cheated on. I don't know why this makes me so anxious, but it does. And reading these books close to each other have helped me understand that this is something I just don't like in books and I should just avoid because it stresses me out. Even though both of those, The Good Soldier and A Handful of Dust, are both good books, I couldn't fully enjoy them because I was so stressed out. So anyway, just a surprise in terms of me like being able to name that this is something that I don't like in books. And then kind of related, I guess, because this helped me realize that the main reason or a main reason I often don't like domestic thrillers is that they so often are churning around somebody cheating on somebody. So I was happy to tell you that I'm not saying that necessarily about this book, but just this is a domestic thriller. This was picked by my book club. So because I don't always love domestic thrillers, now I know why, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this, but I actually felt like this was really solid. Like, I think that I'm never going to fully love this type of suspense or mystery book. I just don't think it's like fully to my genre preferences, even leaving aside the fact that so often it has that trope that I don't like. This was really well done. I gave this 4 stars. I just so I was surprised at how much I liked it, but it also, I think, cemented for me, like, I think that I need to just give up on trying to love a domestic thriller. It never seems to really be my thing. So that's just how it goes. And then another surprise to me was the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. I think I talked a little bit about this in my mid-month check-in, but I just will say that I think what surprised me about this is how much this guy fucking loves dinosaurs and just like the sheer enthusiasm. And I think that that is what has made that book such a breakout or such like a hit, is that he just has such enthusiasm for his subject matter that I think it's like infectious. And I'm thinking that's why that book in particular has taken off somewhat in terms of like sciencey nonfiction. So anyway, that was just a surprise to me. I didn't realize like I was signing up for, you know, however long of like geeking out about dinosaurs, like unashamedly. Okay, and then final surprise would be Sleep by C.L. Taylor. I'm only putting this as a surprise just because like this has really stuck with me in a way I didn't expect. I went back and bumped this up from a 3.5 to a 4-star just because like I really like this. Like the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. I think in the moment I didn't, and I mean, I still will say this. I don't like how this starts. I think the first like 20 to 30% of this is not great. Like, I just don't think it has it doesn't have the kind of pacing that I want from this type of mystery, but I really like this book. So just like a surprise, I guess, that this stuck with me as much as it did. Okay, so then we come to hits. First up, The Kingdom by Jess Rothenberg. Again, I talked about this in my mid-month check-in, so I'm not going to say a lot about it other than this was really enjoyable. It's sort of like sci-fi dystopia YA that has a very heavy mystery plot to it, and I felt like those elements came together in a way I really liked. It does have a dual timeline, but it's one that doesn't bug me. I think you probably, I don't know, I think there's some structural weakness it's covering up with that, but for the most part, I'll grant the conceit of it in this case. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Well written. I think if you're looking for a different type of YA sci-fi or dystopia, I would totally recommend this. I think that this delves into a lot of really interesting themes around gender in particular, and also like what it means to be human. I think this has some thematic similarities with something like a Murderbot, like a All Systems Red. It's in that same kind of tradition in terms of like thinking through like what it means to be human in the face of technology. Yeah, just solid, good, 4 stars. Would recommend. I also ultimately ended up giving 4 stars to Storm of Locusts. So this is the follow-up to Trail of Lightning, which is one of my favorite books of the year. I gave that 4.5 stars, and I am so into this series. This is the 6th World series. I'm obsessed with the world building. I'm obsessed with the characters. This little girl gang here on the cover, also these covers are gorgeous, is so much fun in this book. I didn't give it 4.5 stars only because I think that the kind of relationship dynamic it sets up between her and Kai, who we meet in the first book, doesn't make sense to me fully in terms of like the kinds of things they're saying about each other and the kinds of like connection that they have. I just don't think like enough time has passed and there's not been enough history for me to like really buy it fully. So like to me, that was a character motivation that was just it always rang a little false. So I kind of wish that this plot had been, or like at least that part of the plot with the two of them had been in maybe the 3rd or 4th book. I think it would have worked a little better for me, but I just love this. I love the world building. I love everything about it. It's so good. I really love this series. And I said that at my mid-month check-in, I would talk to you guys at this point about if I think that objectively these are better books than the Kate Daniels books. And I don't know, because they are trying to do a slightly different thing. I think that this is darker than the Kate Daniels books and less funny. I do think that there's dark humor in this, but I do think the Kate Daniels books are a little funnier. I also think that the Kate Daniels books follow that more traditional kind of like PI mystery plot pattern that was so popular when urban fantasy was sort of at its height in recent years, like with the Dresden Files, like that kind of plot. I think Kate Daniels perfected. So I think I don't know. I think that maybe the writing in this is objectively maybe slightly better than the Kate Daniels series, but I think I can just ultimately say that they're both really great examples of what they're trying to do. I think that this series is sort of taking some of those tropes that things like the Dresden Files and Kate Daniels really like honed in on, and I think it's taking it kind of to a new place. So maybe it's just more of like this is building on the hard fought soil that Kate Daniels forged. So I think I'm just gonna land on I don't know if it's better, but I think it's as good. But it is trying to do slightly different things. It is darker, and I don't think it's, like I said, as funny. That's where we'll leave that. I still would say I prefer Kate Daniels at this point, but I mean, we'll find out. We still got, like, I think at least 2 to 5. I don't know how many more books. At least 2 more. I've seen 2 more on Goodreads, so we've got more books to come. We'll see where the series goes. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention An English Murder by Cyril Hare. I enjoyed the crap out of this. I'm going to talk more about this in my July video on isolated closed circle mysteries. That's going to be my Christmas in July themed one. So I'll give more of a full review at that point, but I will just tell you, I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. If you're looking for that trope that I've been talking about where like everyone gets stuck together and then people start dying, this is a classic example of it. It's from the period, like the golden age of mystery period. I think it was written like 51. And it's just real good. Like, it's real satisfying. If you're looking for this type of mystery, I don't think this will let you down. I really enjoyed it. Okay, guys, I totally spaced on coming back around to talking about Sleeping Murder, but the good news is that this is a part of Mission Marple, so I'm going to do an entire review of this. I think the day that will go up is July 19th, so I'll give my full thoughts at that point, but for now, I'll just say that this was a 4.5 star book for me for this month. I think just the nostalgia factor here of how good of a Christie this is and how long it's been since I've had a first read of such a good Christie probably bumped this up a little bit in my estimation, but I still enjoyed the hell out of it. 4.5 stars, one of my favorite books I've read in this year, and definitely one of my favorite Agatha Christie first reads I've had in a very long time. Stay tuned for full review later. Okay, back to the video. Okay, so then my 2 favorite books of the month. First, I gave 4.5 stars to Well Met by Jen DeLuca. Guys, this book was a delight. Oh, it just made me so happy. So context here is that on Father's Day, this was my first Father's Day without my dad, and I was real sad. It was a sad day, and I was looking for something to be just like completely immersive and like slow burny and fun. Like, I was really sad I didn't have like a new Mariana Zapata to sink my teeth into, but I remembered that I had an arc for this because this, I am sad to tell you, doesn't come out until September, so you're gonna have to wait to get it, but pre-order it. It'll be worth the wait. So I decided to go ahead and read this because I was like, oh, this is about a Ren Fair. This will be fun. Like, and it was okay. So it's billed as a romantic comedy, which is part of what I thought I was going to get from it. It is not a romantic comedy in my opinion, but what it is a slow burn contemporary romance featuring people who unironically enjoy Ren Fairs. This is a book about a small town where most of the adults every summer get involved in putting on a Ren Fair, and our heroine is in this small town temporarily taking care of her sister who has been injured. So she's taking care of her sister and her niece who is in high school, and the only way that the niece can be in the Ren Fair is if she has a guardian or a parent involved. So that is why our heroine gets involved. And then there's this really grumpy dude who runs the Ren Fair. He's really strict about it, but on the weekends he becomes a pirate at the Ren Fair, and they have a slow burn romance. And it's just, this book was just really cute. It had, like I said, so many elements that I love in terms of like kind of a geeky element to it. Like the hero is definitely more of a beta kind of guy, a little bit of a geekiness, small town, family dynamics. The heroine is like finding out what she wants and who she is and how to stand up for herself in the world. Themes I loved, and it just totally took my mind off what was a very hard day. It was just like really like swoony and transportive, and I just loved it. I really enjoyed this. This just hit the spot for me. I think objectively there's a couple of issues in terms of like the switch from like or like hate to love. I think that there's a little bit objectively issues with that probably. I think if I hadn't personally just enjoyed it so much and given it that extra half star, it's probably more like a 4-star book. But I don't care. I loved it. I had a great time reading it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it. So it comes out in September, I think like September 3rd, maybe something like that. And yeah, I just think it's real good and I would recommend it. So that was my 4.5-star book. Now I'm going to talk to you guys about a 5-star book, and I need to just like, it's a very hard turn here in terms of subject matter. And before we get into this, I need to give some content warnings. The next book I'm going to talk about is a nonfiction book that is about domestic violence. It's called No Visible Bruises by Louise Snyder. And so it is about domestic violence. That means that I need to give you some content warnings here in terms of like intimate partner abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, violence against children. Like, this is a tough read. If you need to leave me here, I understand that. I give that book 5 stars is the TLDR. I would recommend it. It works well as audio. Okay, so if you are gonna stay with me, here's my thoughts. I think this is a book that if you can deal with how grim the subject matter is, I would recommend to just about anyone. And that is because I think that the content of this is great in terms of like, I feel like I learned a lot about how domestic abuse starts. I learned a lot about sort of the cycles of it and how every person involved gets into a cycle that's hard to break out of, both the person being abused and the abuser. I think one of the unusual things about the way that this author approaches the subject is that she is equally curious in sort of like the thought life, emotional life of victims of these kinds of crimes as she is in the people who perpetrate this abuse, and has a lot of empathy and sympathy for how people, and she puts this caveat at the beginning of the book, it is not always men, but it is mostly men. Statistically, most abusers are men, so she just chooses to use he, him pronouns for most of this. So I'm gonna just put that out there and follow suit. So like how men who become abusers, how they are as trapped in that dynamic as the person that they're abusing. Does that make what they do excusable? Absolutely not. But I think what she's interested in is like, what is it that you are getting out of this dynamic? Because you're getting something out of it, and what is it? And so, you know, the middle third of the book is her in, like a lot of it is spent with her time in different prison programs where they essentially like try to kind of name and identify these like toxic elements of masculinity that lead men to become more likely to become abusers. And like, I thought that was super interesting. This is also a really interesting genre mashup, which I kind of alluded to earlier, because I think the first third of this book essentially reads like a true crime story, because she gets into like the minutia of this one family annihilation case where the father was abusing the mother and the children for a very long time, and then eventually ended up killing the whole family and himself. So she like gives you, it reads really like kind of a true crime story at that point. So that I thought was really interesting, and she uses that as sort of a case study to talk about like what are common dynamics and like cycles of abuse that women go through, and like how the woman in this scenario, or like the relationship in this scenario, really like exemplifies some of that. So I just thought that was super interesting, well done, emotional. I cried so many times in this book. And this does have also some elements of sort of like reportage, so like interviewing various like experts and like going and, you know, spending time with them at various programs they're running or whatever. It has that too. So it is sort of like a genre mashup. But anyway, I just think that this was a really thought-provoking book, one that is really difficult to get through, but has some really great information content-wise, and is also really well written. Like, it's not just dry research being reported. I think that you will find this a compelling read. So I gave this 5 stars. This is up there, one of my top 1 or 2 books I've read so far this year. I would really recommend people read it. I think it was very eye-opening to me, and seeing some dynamics that I think I intuitively felt maybe were abusive for certain people in my life and some of their relationships, and kind of having her name some of the sort of like early warning signs was really instructive to me. And anyway, I'm blabbling at this point, but I really enjoyed is a weird word, but I'm really glad I read this. I would really recommend this, and this is some of the best nonfiction I've read in quite some time. So really good. Okay, and that will do it for the month of June. That is my wrap up. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're kind of in the mid-year range. I'm gonna have my mid-year freak out tag, I think, up next week. So let me know how your reading is going so far this year. Like, is it a good reading year, bad reading year? What's your fave? What's your least fave? Whatevs. Let me know how it's going in the comments below. And I think that will do it. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that will do it. Hope you guys are having an absolutely lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!